think that hopefully we can use some of the content from this to help inform people who don't know a lot of the accuracies of Bitcoin and think things that are read in the newspaper, like Bitcoin is dead, are accurate. So what are we talking about today? We are talking about Bitcoin myths, and we're going to be busting some of them. So thanks for joining us today. I'm Jessica Levesque. I'm C4's Executive Director, and today we're joined by the CBP Committee, the Certified Bitcoin Professional Committee. And we're going to be talking about those things that you hear and you read, and you're like, is this true? I don't know. And we're going to tell you. So we have Dirk Anderson with us. He is the chair of the committee. Dirk, will you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, I'm the chair of the committee. I'm also the chief technology officer for Salt Lending, a crypto-backed lender. And you know, to just start with the very first myth, turns out that Bitcoin's not dead.
No.
I'm just going to put that out there.
All right. We also have two of our committee members, Rodney and Hunter. Rodney, will you say who you are, please?
I am Rodney McInnes from Outlier Solutions. I am the COO and AML Compliance Ninja. We do boutique AML consulting within Canada. I am clearly on the CBP committee. I also sit on a couple other committees as well within the MSB industry in Canada.
All right. And we also have Hunter with us today.
Hello, it's good to be here. I'm Hunter Albright as a CBP committee member as well. And then outside of that, I do work with startups and emerging tech companies around blockchain and cryptocurrency application development.
And he never talks about it, but he's also an educator teaching people about, you know, the business of crypto and blockchain. So.
Which is so important and why we are all here today, right? Everyone on the committee volunteers their time. You all volunteer your time because you want more people to understand how Bitcoin actually works and to dispel some of the myths that are out there, like Bitcoin is dead. And that seems to be like a favorite. If Bitcoin has died as many times as they've said it has, they being like news outlets, it's like definitely a cat with 9 lives because it just keeps coming back. Yeah, so I'm excited to talk about some of the things that people have heard. If you are listening to this and are watching it later and you think, oh, I've heard this, I don't know if it's true or not, put it in the chat in YouTube or on Twitter. And we are going to do a second live stream next month about Bitcoin myth busting so that we'll be able to answer anything that you're wondering about then as well. So let's get into kind of the basics of a myth that we might have heard before, which I hear often. I was actually recently with a friend of mine and her sister said to me, isn't Bitcoin like monopoly money? It's just fake. I was like, no. And now you're going to get a lecture. So thanks for bringing that up. But so there is this idea that it is fake. It doesn't exist. It's magic. You know, it's not real. And so let's start by talking about if Bitcoin actually is fake and if it's magic, Harry Potter money. Let's find out. So Rodney, I was thinking you could start, if that's okay with you, and talk a little bit about if it's actually something real or if we are all living in a monopoly game or not.
I'm not going to touch that monopoly comment. I'm gonna go with that. Like, yes, it is real. It is not fake. I think kind of one of the funny ones is someone who's been in the Bitcoin space for quite some time. Is one of my favorite memes way back in the day was the Reddit wizard of like magic internet money. I have a T-shirt with it on it that I used to wear and think was hilarious. And I don't want to say we shot ourselves in the foot with that one. But there is kind of this unknown element to it of people thinking that it isn't real and it doesn't exist. And part of I think the struggle with that is the physical tangibility of holding cash in your hand. You know that something is real. Where when you're dealing with something that you don't actually hold anymore physically, with the exception of maybe like an open dime or a paper wallet or something like that, you're kind of trusting the the internet and the code to kind of function as it was written, and that is scary for folks who know nothing about coding, me. But it also is open source. It's very clear. It's all there to kind of verify with, which, I mean, I don't want to get too deep into kind of traditional finance and how opaque that is, and how there is no way to kind of verify how much money is out there and stuff like that. There's a lot of kind of question marks. So the joy of Bitcoin is that it is constantly verifiable forever. As far as Ponzi schemes, I feel that people that know what or that say this don't necessarily know what a Ponzi scheme is. Be like, I work in AML. I'm familiar with the function of a Ponzi scheme. And while I think there may be exchanges that function as a Ponzi scheme, I don't think Bitcoin itself could be considered a Ponzi scheme. I understand kind of the alignment within where people who promote a Ponzi scheme are always like really enthusiastic about how much money they're making and trying to get everybody else in, because that's how it functions. If you don't have more money coming in, the Ponzi scheme dies. And so you have to constantly be bringing money in. And I think you kind of cross the boundary with the enthusiasm of Bitcoiners. And I'm sure everybody's seen jokes online about, you know, folks in Bitcoin talking about Bitcoin are insufferable, let's say. So Jessica, your friend, was probably like, ugh, when you said that you're getting a lecture, because they're probably used to lectures.
I do hear people say, like, when I start talking about it, they're like, this again. I'm like, you got to make it fun though. So I feel like if you want to make it reference to Monopoly or something else, whatever it is, to draw people in and explain, like, well, it's not Monopoly money, but if you were playing a game, like, here's how it would be decentralized, and that, like, there's no one banker, we're all bankers, you know. And so there is a way to tie in some of these myths to make it interesting, but in a factual way, for sure. And go ahead, Dirk.
I was just gonna say, I've been banned from talking about Bitcoin at the Thanksgiving table on the last couple of Thanksgivings. So
So are you not invited to Thanksgiving this year?
I'm invited, but I just get the advance notice that I'm not allowed to talk about Bitcoin.
I have three
Invite you to
shirts.
Canadian Thanksgiving.
I have 3 shirts that have warnings that say, like, may randomly start talking about Bitcoin. I have another one that says, let me know when I need to stop talking about Bitcoin.
Yeah. I have that one.
Of course you do. And so it's, you know, it's not shocking. My family at this point is so used to it. And like, frankly, I've educated enough of them that, like, the ones that are going to listen already know, and the other ones will just get up and leave the room. And like, that's their prerogative.
Well, eventually they're going to know about it, whether they want to or not. It's becoming something everyone has heard of, even people that I'm shocked that they've heard of it and know what it is now. So, and I have people that never used to want to hear about it now being like, hey, don't you do something with that Bitcoin thing? Because I've been hearing about it and now I feel like I need to know about it. I'm like, yes.
Yeah, I think something that's interesting too, just around that whole "it's not real" thing, right, is that most people be shocked. You know, most people who just go about their day dealing with, you know, money in kind of the traditional old-fashioned sort of ways, be shocked to know that it's not even just you can start talking about things like Venmo and, you know, and other, like, you know, online you know, money transfer schemes, but the idea is that it's all, you know, somewhere in the background there's dollars moving around and, you know, and adjusting for all that. But I think what most people don't know necessarily is that that all of the dollars that are technically in circulation don't exist, right? That depending on, and that's just dollars in the US, right? I mean, I think this year, or since 2020, I think it's probably about 80% of the dollars actually exist as real paper money somewhere. 20% of the dollars that are flying around between banks and bank accounts and stuff like that don't actually ever exist. They've never been printed. There isn't actually a dollar that goes along with that. It's literally just an entry in a ledger, and a less secure ledger than a blockchain. So
are you saying it's just electronic money?
It might be. Yeah.
I feel like I always use this reference because I love Harry Potter, so I'll bring it up again. But this idea that you're able to go to Gringotts Bank and all of your coins, all of your money is sitting in some vault that's being protected by individuals that, and you know it's there, you know you're going to be able to go and pick up all those coins and like DuckTales dance through it, whatever, just go swimming in it. That's not a reality. If you go to the bank and you say, okay, I'd like to see all of my money right now somewhere, they will say they don't have it because it is online. They will say, oh, we can prove to you that it's online, but it is electronic in the same way that Bitcoin is. But the difference is with Bitcoin, you can hold that yourself. You have the keys to that account in a way that you don't with traditional fiat.
I think one of my other faves on that is when folks are like, but what happened if the internet goes down? Well, if the internet goes down, we're going to have more problems than just this. So like, that's going to be a catastrophic event. So like, if that's what you're holding out for, you may not have a good time.
But if the internet goes down and then later goes back up, you would still, if it was forever, wouldn't that be the same thing as what's happening with banking? Because it's not like they have the money sitting on some like paper that they're writing down.
We had an issue in Canada, I don't know, a month ago or so, where there was a major internet outage and it took down, like it was a Rogers, I think, it took down the Interact like mechanism for payment, which is kind of the layer above this or below the central bank in Canada. So it was a massive outage and a huge issue. And it's like, to your point, it's one of those things. If it's happening to Bitcoin, it's probably happening to banks.
It can happen to Swift, right?
The interesting thing about that is that it actually helps, I think, strengthen the case for Bitcoin and the sort of decentralized platforms, because if you had a region that was out from a connectivity perspective, if you could connect in another country or another region, you still could execute your transaction, where if the core bank is down, that bank is going to be down till it's not down. And so there is some resiliency that is built in, because again, if it's catastrophic and it's global, then that's one thing. But otherwise, there probably are more avenues for you to be able to execute your transaction in a way that doesn't exist with traditional banking.
It's my cell phone that I could use to do transactions as well, that isn't on the internet, but is on a different network.
Yep.
Do you want to explain that for a second, just how that works? Maybe just at a basic level, since you brought that up, Rodney. How is that possible?
Sure. I mean, transactions move via the internet for the main part on Bitcoin, but you can, like, there was, I can't remember who it was. I want to say BitPesa or something like that, who was doing a kind of a Bitcoin offering in Africa, where you could send Bitcoin via text message. So very simple, very, very secure, very easy way to send value. I mean, there's a gentleman who operates CoinKite, which is a company in Canada, who has done a Bitcoin transaction over ham radio or shortwave radio. And it went from Toronto-ish to California. So it was an international transfer that was sent over shortwave radio, which is kind of amazing. So there are definitely other ways to conduct Bitcoin transactions without actually needing the internet. I mean, you got the Blockstream satellite and stuff like that. So there's tons of options that don't directly include your local ISP.
Right. Yeah, I think, like, to your point, right? I mean, it does need the internet. It needs mining nodes to be able to talk to each other and all that sort of thing. But banks need the internet, right? Everything kind of needs the internet in our day and age, as you said at the beginning, right? So, but if you're talking about the fact that it can be used and utilized sans the internet, I think that segues very nicely into our kind of next myth, right? That you need the internet in order to be able to use it. So.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about that, Hunter, and then maybe some real life use cases as well. So when is Bitcoin being used right now? Feel free to take that whichever direction you want, but that is a myth that people think that it's just something that is not usable.
Yeah, I think I want to bridge off of real quickly off of the digital sort of currency or digital payment mechanism, because predominantly we are all paying digitally and have been over the last 40 years as it's been increasing in terms of the prevalence. For me, I think one of the big transitions that's happening is we are looking at how we migrate trust from traditional banks and companies to tools, which are technologies and tools like Bitcoin. And so I think that is a challenge for a lot of people because they haven't experienced it, but they have experienced working with companies. And so that's part of the education gap and experience gap that C4 and others are trying to close to help people understand how to onboard and offboard in terms of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. So if we think about, hey, it's Bitcoin is just another version of digital payments, the use cases are really endless. But I think some of the ones, and Dirk and I were talking about this earlier, that I think have come up. I think it's really interesting and neat to see the crowdfunding applications where people are giving money to people through different websites using crypto and Bitcoin to fund initiatives. And in particular, I think Ukraine has demonstrated that in a lot of different ways. One, in terms of people donating to support the efforts in Ukraine. And secondly, hiring people out of Ukraine to do work while they're in sort of the sort of current situation that they're in.
Can I jump in real quick before you finish this and just say something? So C4 has partnered with Crypto Chicks, Consensus Academy, and Accenture, and we are all donating different materials, educational materials, to people that have been displaced by the war. And so I think we're talking tomorrow because we're giving out a bunch of scholarships. So people that want to learn about Bitcoin basics with our course and want to become CBPs and want to use Crypto Chicks educational materials, they have a ton of different videos. And then Consensus Academy has smart contract training. So we're going to help some of these people kind of move through the steps of learning about the basics and then getting into a little bit deeper and seeing the options. And then for those that already have some background with programming, we're going to funnel them into Consensus's Academy to learn some additional information about smart contracts to try to help some of these people, because there are a lot of jobs out there available in this industry, and there are people out there that need jobs. So I just wanted to jump in and say that we're really excited to be partnering with these other educational organizations to make a bit of difference in the world. So we'll be announcing soon how that works. But I think 187 people applied for C4s, something like that. So I'm pretty pumped to see what this ends up looking like, and really how many people we can help, because we all know this, there's real people out there watching this that are, or not watching this, that are interested in making a career change or just need help. And I've heard stories of people that are displaced that kind of had their seed phrases with them, or they had them memorized, and so they're still able to access their crypto after they had left, and they didn't have to worry about that aspect of it, which I think is important. But anyways, you'll be seeing from us in the on socials in the next few days about what we're doing specifically to help these people.
Oh, that is fantastic.
And I think what you just said there is huge,
but
actually, Jessica, to what Hunter's talking about, right? And to this idea that you require the internet. One of the most amazing things is, war breaks out in the country where you live in, and almost instantly the banking system goes down, right? You can't withdraw money, you can't access money. You certainly can't flee the country and then access your money remotely, right? Whereas crypto, since it sits on that distributed blockchain, is available to you wherever you land, right? Your wallet exists, out there in a way that is accessible to you wherever you are. And so you can actually take your money with you instead of trying to sew rubies into, the hem of your dress, the stories we've heard from past wars and stuff. So.
Well, and there's a couple points that I think, this it really illustrates. One for me is that when you, first of all, we're in Canada and the US between the group of us, and I think there is a realization, at least for me, that a lot of the progress is being made outside of the developed countries, and so people experiencing it and really sort of understanding the strength of the technology. I think you have to be willing to look outside of, potentially more developed countries to really see a lot of interesting real life use cases. And so I think that's important because there is a higher need and a higher demand for those sort of capabilities. And then the Ukraine example in particular, we just hired some people out of the Ukraine to help us do a video. And it's a great example where your country might not have the demand for your services, but because you can now accept payments globally, you're able to sustain yourselves even when you have detrimental conditions in your local environment. And I think that is a really powerful and enabling force to think about why Bitcoin and why crypto really matters in terms of driving sort of a global workforce and global collaboration around a lot of sort of topics and issues.
That's one of the things I get a lot from folks, like in around my country and area is folks like, well, like why would I use Bitcoin? What does it have for, like, what does it offer me that I don't have already? I'm like, nothing. You have, well, not nothing, but you have this magic card in your pocket that you just walk around and wave at things and money transfers. Like, it's, there's an element outside of this that you're not kind of considering. So it was like those questions, less so nowadays. That was an early one that I got all the time, but less so now that people, I think, are kind of understanding that there is other ways to send value to, like, to Hunter's point, pretty much anywhere you want to, anytime you want to.
And I think it ties back to the value or it being real, right? The fact that people are willing to accept it and that they feel like they can use it is makes it real, right? The fact that's, and I think the on-ramps and the off-ramps for Bitcoin continually grow, and it does make it more accessible. Now, it's not to say that we as an industry, as a technology, don't have challenges there to simplify it and make it easier for newbies and novices and beginners to feel comfortable with it. But that's not like that hasn't happened before with technology. The one thing I would say about Bitcoin that is, if I look at it from a technology lens that is disproportionate to a lot of other emerging tech things, is the visibility of Bitcoin far exceeds an emerging tech company. And so you oftentimes have the ability to make these mistakes with a very small light on you, where Bitcoin, because it's one, global, and two, the visibility and sort of awareness of it, everything gets scrutinized to a level that is out of proportion, in my opinion, to sort of what would be even a large, well-funded sort of tech startup.
And, and just foundationally, right? I mean, the, real life thing, right? I mean, there are places that just take Bitcoin, right? I mean, there are coffee, and it's a small but growing, number of places still, right? Like with any sort of new technology, but there are coffee shops, and there's a bar in Germany, in Berlin, I think, right? That's been taking Bitcoin for, more than a decade. I just saw on the news yesterday that the McDonald's in Lagoon, Switzerland, has just started taking Bitcoin, right? So that's,
it is happening.
Yeah, it is happening, right? The real world accessibility to your Bitcoin and crypto wallets is absolutely occurring.
Yeah, I mean, Dirk, you're planning on sending me a bunch after this call, right?
Always, yeah.
But I was on something recently. I can't remember. I was just pulling something up to pay for it. I can't remember. Something like pretty normal. It'll come to me later. And it gave the option to pay in Bitcoin, and I squealed like a complete lunatic because I was so excited. It was very unexpected what it was. I'll think of it later and then be like, oh shoot. So maybe for the next live stream I can bring it up. But it is happening where it is appearing. It's suddenly there, and many people aren't taking that. But the more of us that are already using crypto and do choose that option will reinforce to these companies that there are people out there that do want to pay in Bitcoin or another crypto, and that they should keep this because it's good for them to be receiving it as well.
Yeah. So one thing I want to just bring up and bridge to, because Rodney had brought it up, and I think Dirk has show and tell items he can sort of associate with this, is this concept that Bitcoin doesn't really have sort of an equivalent to cash. And Rodney had mentioned OpenDime, and if we think about a paper wallet as well, right? These are two great technologies where it can have a cash-like experience where you can use it and pay for something in a way that is very similar to cash, and also sometimes, can work its way around some of the maybe the delay of a traditional transaction using a wallet. Like with OpenDime, you can verify it essentially instantaneously. And once you trust the technology, you don't have to wait for the same confirmations that you might if you're leveraging a wallet. So it is just a different technology. And so it's a case of people getting comfortable with the transfer of trust to that technology versus what we're used to. At some point in time when people went from shells to gold and then gold to paper and paper to debit card and credit card, we've had this same transition multiple times. So this transition is not new in sort of our broader history of how we think about money and payment and store value.
Yeah, and imagine go back in time and think about how you would have coins, literal gold coins, some type of coin in your pocket. You're carrying that around, and then suddenly the government says, "Oh, hey, thank you for your coin. I'm gonna pay you back with this," and you're holding up a piece of paper, and you're like, "What? No, give me."
The people who didn't trust that, and the people who freaked out, yeah.
I mean, it was a really big deal to transition from, and now if we go somewhere and someone's like, "Here's a gold coin," I'd be like, "Here is not a gold coin for me, because I'm not going to take that. Like, what are you talking about?" Right? That'd be so bizarre. But so it just shows how there is a transition period. People might not enjoy the transition period. There are always early adopters to things, but eventually the cycle goes from, kind of denial, this isn't something, to these misconceptions, to it's dead, we don't want it, going back and forth. And then eventually you start to see these companies like I did the other day, where it's popping up as an option to pay. And I paid using Bitcoin and I was excited. It was shocking to me that it was available for this company. So then I had to kind of be like, oh, okay, I need to go back and make sure that I've got this set up and whatnot. But I did it because why wouldn't I? And so I do think that as more people start doing it, that it will become similar to like banknotes that we use now. And then on that note, I kind of want to talk about banknotes and cash being king, and this idea that whatever I bought on the internet was illicit. I can't tell you, not because I can't remember and I have ADHD, but because I was doing something that I can't say online, which is obviously not true if you know me. It was probably a book or something else along those lines. But I think it would be if we have nothing else to say on this topic, if you do jump in. Otherwise, I think it'd be interesting to talk about the criminal side of things, or rather the not criminal side of things.
So first of all, I would like to jump in and say that I will take your gold coins if you want to give them to me. So, if Jessica turns you down.
If you know that they're gold,
those.
right? If you know how to test that they're actually gold, but then you're giving me all your Bitcoin, so we're even.
Right. It all works out. I think you might be surprised at the amount of Bitcoin you won't get from me. But
likewise.
Yeah, no, I think, starting down the conversation of that criminal stuff, I think it's really important too that, if you go back and watch, was it 2 live streams ago that we did the whole one on like AML and tracing transactions and stuff like that, right? Because I think a reason that a lot of people think that it's that only criminals use it, or that it's a great thing for criminals, is because they also think, and there tends to be this myth around it, that it's completely anonymous, that that spending your Bitcoin is completely anonymous, and that's just not true, right? I mean, and that's what we walked through. We showed how to trace Bitcoin from wallet to wallet to wallet, because it's all on this ledger that can't be messed with, right? Unlike databases and in banks and stuff like that, where if you hack the computer, you get access to it, you can change the data that's in it, right? You can't change the data that's in the blockchain. And so the ability to be able to trace transactions from place to place to place is complete transparency there. There is some pseudo anonymity that comes from the fact that people don't necessarily know who owns a wallet, but again, as soon as you send out of a wallet to somebody or give your wallet address to somebody so that they can send you Bitcoin, then somebody does know that that's your wallet, right? And that you can build a web of information out from there. So yeah, so I mean, I think fundamentally that, you know, that myth, that idea that Bitcoin is anonymous just is not true at all. But a lot of people still think that, which is why they think it's such a great thing for criminals. And I should let Rodney talk about this because he's totally the expert on this piece of it, right?
Do you know who loves the fact that people think Bitcoin is anonymous? Law enforcement. Love it. People do things thinking that no one can see what's going on when that is not the case. One of my favorite examples of this is the Silk Road takedown, where the two agents that were in charge of kind of the virtual currency or Bitcoin side of that got arrested, charged, and jailed after that for stealing Bitcoin from that raid. So like, it's kind of interesting. And I mean, that was a long time ago, but it's kind of interesting to show that like that is how transparent that thing is. And the other thing that we see a lot kind of in the AML and investigation side of things is people do stuff today that they don't know will be really easy to look at 2, 3, 5 years from now. So you're looking at a lot of things that happened between 2012 and 2016, where a lot of the chain analytics tools, A, didn't exist at all, or B, were very rudimentary. I remember at the blockchain training conference, the first one back in 2016, a gentleman who I know came up to me and was like, "Hey, open your Bitcoin wallet. I'm gonna send you Bitcoin." And I was like, "Okay, sweet." And I opened my wallet and showed it to him. And he pulled his phone out and flashed my phone, and then turns and looks at me and is like, "Oh, you're clean." What did you just do? And he had developed a chain analytics tool to basically look and see if my wallet address had interacted with the dark web or like all of these other elements. And that was the first time I ever saw it. And it was like, in my AML brain was like, wow, this is really interesting. At the same time, as a human, I was terrified. So it was very interesting to see kind of the privacy implications, but also the transparency implications. And so, you know, if you're doing bad things, it's going to be there, to Dirk's point, on a publicly available immutable ledger that doesn't tell everybody it's connected to you. But if you've KYC'd at a exchange somewhere, it's going to be easier to connect to you. So there's elements like that are very interesting. You do see reports from some of the really large chain analytics companies that will put out reports and say that, you know, X% of cryptocurrency was used for illicit actions over the past year, and those numbers are interesting and low, frankly. I think the last one from Chainalysis was like somewhere between like 0.8 and 1.3% of all crypto transactions were related to criminal activity. That being said, there is an element within that of you don't know what you don't know. And so there could be transactions that are not connected, or that are connected, sorry, to criminal activity that we just don't know are connected to criminal activity because it's pseudonymous on the blockchain. So there are certain elements to that, but this was a long time ago. I want to say 2012 to 2014, somewhere in that range. An international governmental body made a statement that they cannot actually make a determination of the specific amount, but it is estimated that somewhere between 2 to 5% of global GDP is related to money laundering. And that is an astronomically large number. That is somewhere in the multiple trillions of dollars. And so it's really interesting to kind of look at it from a, like, what is this number and how is it equated from the traditional finance world to the blockchain world. And it's very interesting to see, because in the blockchain space, you can very clearly say that this percent of transactions are related to crime. There may be others that we don't know about, but this specific percentage is related to it. Where in the traditional finance space, you're just guessing. You really have no idea. It is so global. It is so disconnected and not interconnected that trying to figure out that number is an impossible task.
But we have no idea what that total number is, but we certainly have ideas of the reality, right? I mean, it was just back in, this is just the most recent one I can think of, right? In July, Deutsche Bank was fined $7 million for having over 700 unreported. This is just not the ones they reported that they identified, but unreported money laundering transactions for one family, for one crime family. And so, yeah, I mean, we know it goes on, and yeah, to your point, we know it goes on in astronomical amounts, right? And this goes back to Jessica's, comment about, I mean, when it comes to anonymity, cash is still king, right? The movement of cash, that's what's hard to trace, and is anonymous, and it absolutely still rules the world of money laundering.
Yeah, but don't do it, everyone who's listening. It's not the way to go. Rodney and his friends will know. But so I do think that it's important to kind of dispel some of these like basic myths, this idea that this is something that people are using. And I think using illegally, but as you continue to meet more people like me, like Rodney, like Hunter, like Dirk, and you're like, oh, I know you, and I know you're using Bitcoin, and like you're using it to, buy a book or like buy fish and chips at, the pub that I know Dirk loves. Or whatever it is. I hope they start accepting it, Dirk. So next ETH Denver, we can go there and pay in Ether or Bitcoin. That would be cool. But you start to meet more and more people who are using these cryptos, and you realize that they're good people. They're people they're people you like, people you trust. And then as that progresses, it becomes like, oh, here's a dollar bill instead of here's a dollar bill. And oh my gosh, I can't believe that you're giving me this piece of paper that means nothing, right? So I do think we are moving along. And so if you are still skeptical, I would disagree with that, but that is your choice. But as you continue to learn more about it, I do think that education is that barrier. Once you start to really absorb and understand all of this, that you'll hopefully fall in love with it, just like we all have. Otherwise, we wouldn't be geeking out once a month on these live streams talking about Bitcoin. But there are a lot more myths out there. And so I would encourage people who know of others, you're not sure if it's true or not, to send it to us, like I said, in the YouTube chat or comments in this video or on our socials, so that we can see what it is that you are wondering about. We'll do some polls over the next month as well about myths and see what other ones we can bust and some of the facts we can talk about. And we're going to do a second Mythbusters live stream next month in November. So stay tuned for that. And if you're watching this later, check out the second video on Mythbusters. Is there anything else we wanted to talk about before we go? I think next time we're going to talk about security on the blockchain, which is going to be something that Dirk is going to do an excellent job explaining. I'm excited to hear you talk more about that, Dirk. Anything else we wanted to talk about today in this stream before we go?
I don't think so. Like I said, go back in, if you're curious about some of these, we've touched on some of these things in the past, right? If you want to have a better idea how wallets work, we did a whole thing on that, and hardware wallets that included, things like Open Diamond stuff for being able to transfer money between folks. If you want to go back and look at, the lack of real anonymity, go back to the fireside chat that we did with
that was a really good one.
Yeah, just a couple of months ago, and yeah, there's other good stuff out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us today, both the listeners and the people on the committee today. I really appreciate you. We couldn't do this without you at C4. We are a nonprofit that is mostly run by volunteers who just generously donate their time because they care about cryptocurrencies and want people like you who are watching this to be able to have correct information. So stay tuned for the next one coming up in November. And thank you all for joining us from the CBP committee and everyone of you watching.
Take care, everyone.